Hello, everyone. Welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting. This is part two of my collecting history. In part one, you heard about how I got into comics as a kid, and then how ultimately, after grad school, I kind of got out of comics because I got a job in a rural area, and there just wasn't a comic book store anywhere near me, and I didn't have easy access, and I just kind of drifted away from them. But even though I stopped buying comic books, I never lost my interest in comics and the characters, and I was kind of satisfied through movies, and then also I would follow like internet stories and that kind of stuff. So I kind of knew what was going on in comic books, even though I wasn't like actively buying them. But it wasn't until the New 52 that I actually really got the bug again. And New 52 came out, and I was hearing good things, and I was like, okay, I should, investigate how I could do this again. And what I found was there still were no comic book stores anywhere near me, but you could do digital comics. And I was like, all right. So I started doing the digital comic thing, and, I read Scott Snyder's Batman run, and I was reading Brian Azzarello's Wonder Woman run, and I was reading, that's where when I started reading Carol Danvers as Captain Marvel, and there's a bunch of other books that I was reading at the time. And for a couple of years, I really enjoyed getting comic books that way, but ultimately, it just wasn't the same as having the book in your hand. And so eventually, I just kind of drifted away from it again. It lost my interest. It didn't hold me. Just having a digital copy and paying that much for a digital copy just wasn't satisfying. It wasn't something that like really kept me hooked. So, but in the meantime, I was still following comics on things like IGN and other places, and like kind of keeping up to date on what were good stories and good writers and good characters and that kind of stuff. But, didn't have anything to kind of satisfy that collecting bug. And as you can see from behind me, a couple years ago, I found something, and they were Funko Pops. And I kind of dove into the Funko Pop thing for Star Wars and DC and Marvel characters. And for a while, that was satisfying, and things were kind of going down that track until, of all things, my sister moved. And you're going to be like, what does that have to do with anything? And my sister lives quite a ways away from me, and she moved to a new house, and I noticed when we were moving her in like May of 17, that there was a comic book store on the corner just down from where you turn to go down her road. And so, and I didn't think much about it, but I just took note of it. And in the summer of 18, in August, I went back and went to visit her for like a week. And her and my niece and my nephew, and so one day we were just kind of sitting around the house, and I was like, you want to walk down to the comic book store? And she's like, sure, because my sister has an interest in comics too. We have fairly similar tastes, and she was never quite as big into them as I am, but she enjoyed them. And so we walked down there, and I bought a couple of trades, kind of the usual suspects. I bought the first Rebirth Batman, and I bought the first Rebirth Nightwing, and couple other books, and then I caught a couple of issues of the current issues, and you can see those here behind me. Batman 24 and that Wonder Woman 23, which I bought strictly for the Jenny Frison cover, who I didn't even know who Jenny Frison was at the time. I just loved that cover, and I didn't know that was the proposal at the time when I bought it, but turned out it was. And in addition, I bought another trade of a book that I'd been hearing good things about, and that was All New Wolverine. And you can tell I enjoyed it because this is issue number 1, and I went back and got this much later. But I bought the trade to start with, and the only reason I'm not showing you the trade is because my sister has borrowed the trade, and I will probably never see it again. But this story really hooked me, and so when I went back to visit my sister in September, we went back to the comic book store, and I got like the next couple of trades and the current issues of All New Wolverine, and I kept going with Tom King's Batman run, and there was a couple other books I was getting, but those were like the two main ones. And then my sister had gotten Darth Vader, the Marvel Darth Vader stuff, and so I'd read that. I'd borrowed and read her Darth Vader stuff, and so I'd gotten the bug back, but I came back home, and then I wasn't going to go back up there till like Christmas time. And so in October rolled around, and I was kind of like, I'd like to read some of these, but again, I don't really want to go back to the digital thing. And I read something online about Halloween Comic Fest, and I was like, well, let's look and see again where are some stores. And I noticed there were two stores that were a little bit closer than when I'd been before, about an hour or maybe a little less. And so I decided to kind of make a loop up to Kansas City and hit a few places, even some that were further away, and just kind of see what I could find and pick up a few books. And one of those stores was Phoenix Comics in Peculiar, Missouri, which is only about 45 minutes from me. And I was like, well, this is actually not too bad. So I kind of got the bug, and I went in October, but then I didn't go again till like December. And so I was sort of in, but mostly still out, and I was buying a few books. But on one of my visits to Phoenix, they had a bunch of lenticular covers, which I don't know if I can make this lenticular work for the camera or not. This is Spider-Gwen 24 or 25, which I had to pick up because as a child of the 90s, and, lenticular covers, and this was like, oh, I remember those, and I had to get a couple of those. And this was kind of Spider-Gwen and her turning into Gwenum, and so that was a story that kind of hooked me in, and so I had to go back and get the couple of back issues and get the one where she actually joins with the Venom, and and I kind of got hooked into that and Jason Latour's story on there. And then another book I picked up that I'd been hearing a bunch about kind of in that interim time was Mr. Miracle. And so at this point, this was another Tom King book, and I really, really enjoyed this story, and I was kind of starting to devour Tom King. So at this point, I'm reading Batman, I'm reading All New Wolverine, and Spider-Gwen, and Mr. Miracle, and a couple other things, and I was starting to get back into like Spider-Man and some stuff, but I was still I was trying to do this from a distance and only going every couple of months, and I was like, I'll do the best I can, but if I miss some issues, oh well. And then in February, PlanetCon rolled around, and I was like, I'd never been to the PlanetCon in Kansas City. It was something I'd thought about a few times, but I just never went. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go this year. And the main reason I went was I was going to take some of my Funkos and get them signed. So I took my Batman, the animated series, Funko, and got Kevin Conroy to sign it. And I took a Spider-Gwen Funko and got Jason Latour to sign it. But I also took some of my comics. I took up, obviously you've just seen, my Mr. Miracle signed by Tom King. My Batman 24 signed by Tom King. I took up, I got a trade while I was up there and got Brian Azzarello to sign my Wonder Woman trade from the New 52. And while I was there, I spent more of my time looking at comics than I did at Funkos. And I was kind of like slowly in my mind making that shift. And then later in March, my sister was like, after she'd heard I went to PlanetCon, she's like, well, we should go to C2E2. So we went to C2E2 for a day, and we got a bunch more signatures, and like she had got me hooked on, she had been reading Thor, and so I had started reading her versions of Thor. So I bought some covers of Thor, and we got Jason Aaron to sign it, and then it's like, and I also discovered Art Germ, and it was like, oh, so then I was like, man, I really enjoy his covers, so I had to do some investigation of Art Germ and some of his stuff, and that was not an artist I'd really heard of before, but I really loved this cover, and then I seen those Supergirl covers, and I was like, oh, and that's good. And then I got into, after that was over, I got into also Jenny Frison signed my Wonder Woman cover, and then I was reading Spider-Man in the lead up to 800, and this is obviously not one of the lead ups to 800. This is 792, the Phoenix variant, but I just love this cover, and it's one people don't show off, so I thought I'd show off a different one. But I got hooked into the Red Goblin storyline, and at this point I'm collecting a whole bunch of books from a distance. And then I discovered X-Men Red, which was I discovered because it was Tom Taylor, and All New Wolverine was coming to an end. And so I finally bought the bullet, and I actually talked to the guys that spent some time in Phoenix and talked to the guys and about my situation, and that if it would be okay if I had a pull, even though I lived 45 minutes to an hour away, and probably be every couple of weeks before I got in. And they were real accommodating, and they worked with me, and at that point I was hooked. And I've been full bore ever since. Maybe too much, and we'll talk about that a little bit in a later video, but I was back into comics, and then I started looking at YouTube stuff, and eventually that led me to here and making videos for you guys. So that's kind of the, how I got back in. In upcoming videos, I'm gonna my next couple of videos, I want to talk about some of my favorite books from 2018 and kind of recap actually the books I picked up. And then I also want to talk about, I kind of dove back in with both feet here last year, and with my budget, that was probably not the best or wisest idea, at least initially, and trying to come to terms with what it means to want to collect, but to do it smartly, and when you're on a fairly tight budget, and, you can't have everything. And I was, as you can see by the stack of books I showed you here, I was starting to want to have everything. And so I'm going to have a video about that, and also probably coming up, eventually I want to get to my 2019 want list and kind of break some of that down with you guys. And then I also have some more stuff I want to talk about budget-wise and being kind of smart, collecting smart, at least hoping to be smarter about my collecting, and maybe you guys can learn from some of that. And then I got some support videos I want to do for some other YouTubers that are doing contests, Thanatos and John's Comics with Kids. So hopefully there'll be a lot of stuff coming. I appreciate you guys for sticking with me through these first couple of videos, which were just kind of recap, and I will catch you next time.